In Doug Casey's most recent novel, Assassin, there was a movement that the deep global elites planned because they knew that their biggest threat was guns. So what they did was they set out a plan for this group of activists to go out and start doing these mass shootings in schools, hospitals, nursing homes, just these atrocities of shootings with the movement called Guns Rules. So these people would go into these buildings, they would shoot it up, and then they would spray paint gun rules on it. I mean, it took over the world. Everyone was talking about it. And might I add you, this was completely planned by these global elites. Then what happened? Other people, just regular Joes and Janes that followed this movement, they said, wow, this is, I mean, a few of them who were sociopaths, obviously took up and started shooting up places as well. And it was miraculous. So what happened? The public started to cry out for a banning of guns. And I mean, they demanded it. They said, we cannot have this in our systems anymore. What was the intention of this movement? The global elites knew that guns were their biggest threat. So they wrote up this big plan to kind of facilitate it. And they already had all the measures ready to be taken when the public demanded the banning of guns. They start with ammunition, then they go on to different calibers of guns until there are no guns. Today, we're going to talk about something else, art. There's this massive new movement of people destroying these historical figures of massive art. I'm just going to scroll down and show a ton. I mean, a few, but look at this. There is just incredible examples in the name of climate change across the globe. We have these movements in climate change where people are destroying these millions upon millions of dollars worth of paintings or art, throwing soup cans at it, pretty much doing whatever it is. So what I'm going to propose to you today is just taking the example from Doug Casey's book, where a group of global elites intentionally started a movement, then the public took it over. Then the global elite proposed a plan in place, like banning all guns. They're already in act. Let's just say, I mean, I'm not even going to put on my tinfoil hat. I'm just going to take the exact same example from the book and play it out today. Let's just say that there was a group of people who wanted to facilitate some sort of draconian measures, and they thought climate change would be a great way to do it. So what they would do is they would start pushing people out there, recording them, destroying these figures in the name of climate change. Then activists of this group would say, you know what, that's a great cause. I'm going to start doing this. Then the public takes over and everyone starts doing these extremist examples in the name of climate change. And that's what we have to do. So what happens if the groups and masses start demanding for action on climate change? Do you think the global elites or a hidden figure would not come out, rise from the phoenix ashes, and they would propose a fantastic new bill that could fight climate change, and they would have everything ready? They could reduce all the carbon on the world. And might I add you, humans produce a lot of carbon. So I'm not predicting anything, saying that this is what's happening. I am just proposing the similarities in these two different cases. And Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Josh, you did, I think, a good job of summing it up. But think about this. If you want power, you probably don't want to have competition for the power. And a well-armed citizenry with, a bunch of handguns is competition to the power. The way I kind of think about it is that a B-2 stealth bomber and a nuclear warhead can't necessarily keep the peace. It might be able to glass an entire city, but what's the point of glassing an entire city if you're the elites and you want to rule? You don't want to rule over a pile of rubble. So you've got to get people to give up the guns because the guns represent a threat to you, the elites. But you just can't take their guns. The trick is you've got to make people want to give up their guns. So essentially you generate the exact problem that you then come in to solve. And if you can do it without getting caught, especially if you have ways to influence the media or to shape the narrative, then to create the context, then it's pretty effective. Every time I hear these stories, I guess my first thought is that a part of me admires the elites, as anyone, or what's the phrase, give the devil his due. And so I'm always amazed when I see these things. But at the same time, too, one of the things, at least here in America, where Josh and I are at, so anyways, Josh, you see the shootings where it comes in pretty obvious. As far as climate change goes, Scott Adams had a really good quip where if anyone's talking about, we need to do X because climate change is about to blow up the world, or it's the biggest problem we have, there's some major problem that we have to rise up to humanity to solve. But the problem itself hinges upon the concept that we know exactly what the world temperature will be and what ocean levels will be, or some other variables, in an incredibly complex, equation 100 years from now. And my response, quoting Adams, is basically, if we can predict with such clarity and such accuracy 100 years into the future of what the temperature will be and what ocean levels will be, we have nothing to worry about climate
Yeah.
change.
And
Even
might I
drop the
add, you,
mic.
Justin,
Yeah.
last night there was a 100% chance of snow in my area. You know what, Justin? We did not have any snow. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
we
And
cannot predict the future on the same day with 100% accuracy, how can we predict the future 100 years from now?
yeah.
When Justin said that, it's a jaw-dropping moment. But
Yeah.
that's
And
beside the
it's a
point.
huge hat tip to Scott Adams. Scott
Yeah,
Adams is the one that,
if you get the masses demanding something for anything, let's just say right now it's climate change. People are demanding change across the world. This is happening in every single country, almost directed. And
yeah.
if this is happening, let's just take COVID for an example. I mean, now there's tons of articles coming out from a lot of these elitist websites where they are saying the number one stopper of climate change was COVID lockdowns. We can see all the CO2 emissions dropped during this time frame if we can only do lockdowns every single year, or you know what, every 6 months. You know what? Maybe we can do lockdowns every month, just on the weekends. Who needs to have fun on the weekends? Anyway, we can do it every weekend. We can lock down every single day, and you know what? That's going to reduce the carbon enough to save the planet. So when you start to see more and more of these articles coming out and the media taking up and saying, you know what, maybe for the good of the planet, and you know what, we have to do it, because if we don't do it, your grandma's going to die. If we don't do this, the entire globe is going to go extinct, Justin. We have to lock down. And if the masses
it's an
are
appeal to
praying for
fear.
that,
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
appealing
that
to
is
fear.
exactly what they would want. So, I mean, just be wary when you see these kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I would say it too is that, especially like if you control the various organs that people, or when I say organs, what I mean is like, the media outlets, Twitter, at least until only yesterday before Musk took them over, etc. You can shape the narrative. If you can shape the narrative, you're able to put blinders, or no, I should say it like that. You're able to focus people's attention on what they need to be focused on. And more importantly, you're able to subtly suggest how they should think about it. And so when it comes to climate change, you basically create the climate as being, the ultimate evil, or the ultimate thing that you should fear, and anything should be done.
And might I add, these are all something that you cannot measure. You cannot measure how
Yeah.
bad climate change is going to be because they are using an unknown force. In the future, the world will end. It is
Yeah,
something that we
and
can be infinitely scared of, and there's no way to measure success or failure.
yeah, and it gets even worse than that too, because when you look at funding, when you look at what grants are written for, do you think the people, the scientists that write grants, that need grants, that depend upon grants, do you think they're completely objective? Now, they might like to think they're completely objective, but Josh, just between us girls, do you really think they're that objective?
Yeah, I get my
And
funding from the government, and the more I fear about climate change, the more funding I get. And
because
you
the
know
more
what?
power the government gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It's just odd. As someone said, I think it was Munger, show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. And just
Bingo.
be weary when you see these odd activist groups going across the world, all destroying random pieces of art in the name of climate change. I mean, just think for a moment, what if that was intentional? And I'm not saying it is, because I would never be a conspiracy theorist. That is far beyond my reach of imagination. But what I can tell you is there are odd similarities to books like Doug Casey's, who he was not making predictions either. It was a fictional novel. I mean, I'm just pulling stuff from an odd fictional novel. But might I add you, the similarities are eerie.
When reality becomes stranger than fiction, you should pause and ask yourself that, if I haven't become a conspiracy theorist, have I perhaps instead become a complacency theorist?